The United States is desperate. 90% of the world's rare earth refining is in China's hands. And without these minerals, there can be no missiles, no fighter jets, and no defense. Each F-35 fighter jet needs more than 400 kilos of these materials. Every radar, every combat drone, every modern submarine depends on them. And here's the most serious part. The United States was once the world leader in this sector, but it let its industry die. It closed mines, outsourced refining, and took a bet on cheap dependence on Beijing. China not only extracts more, it refines better, cheaper, and without polluting as it did before. It has the factories, the engineers, control of the market, and the full political backing of the Communist Party. And if it ever wants to tighten the screws, it could leave half the world without supplies in a matter of days. In fact, we have a very recent example. 2 days after Trump declared his trade war on the world, the Chinese trade minister announced that his country would start requiring licenses from foreign companies that wanted to trade in rare earths. Licenses that naturally depend solely and exclusively on what the government decides. What's more, he also drew up a blacklist of American companies with which it was strictly forbidden to do business. This is no longer about mining, it's about power. And in this game, whoever controls the materials controls the board. The father of modern China was very clear about this.
The Middle East has oil and China has rare earths.
Now, the US, via the Pentagon, is going to try to make up for decades of lost time, and it will do so with a single plan. A single mine and a single company, MP Materials. And to make it work, it's throwing caution to the wind. What is the West's plan to regain control of rare earths? How did China achieve absolute dominance? Can the Pentagon reverse the situation? We'll find out in just a moment, but first, let me explain that Trump has signed an executive order titled Unleashing Alaska's Extraordinary Resource Potential. With this order, he aims to fully tap into the state's vast resources of energy, minerals, timber, and fisheries. And why does this matter? Because it could have direct implications for gold, copper, and silver, right at a time when these metals are booming. Gold has hit all-time highs, topping $4,000 an ounce, while copper and silver have also surged. And this is where the company sponsoring this video comes in, US GoldMining Inc. Its flagship project, Whistler Gold Copper Project, is in Alaska. The Whistler Project mineral resource estimate comprises 294 million tons at 0.68 grams per ton gold, equivalent for 6.48 million ounces gold equivalent in the indicated category, plus 198 million tons at 0.65 grams per ton gold equivalent for 4.16 million ounces gold equivalent inferred. You should review US GoldMining's latest annual report on Form 10K and the technical report summary incorporated in it and its Canadian technical report titled NI 43-101-2024, Updated Mineral Resource Estimate for the Whistler Project, South Central Alaska, with an effective date of September 12, 2024, for information on the company, the project, and the mineral resource estimate. These are available under US GoldMining's profile at www.sec.gov and cedarplus.ca. Here's an interesting fact. A single shareholder controls 78% of the company, something rare in the market. And now, one of the company's most important moments since inception is in the works. US GoldMining has begun the process of an initial economic assessment, also known as a PEA, which stands for Preliminary Economic Assessment. This study is a preliminary review of economic factors, and the timing couldn't be any better, with gold around $4,000 per ounce and copper around $5 per pound. With no debt, a tightly held share ownership, and a political climate that is supportive of resource development in Alaska, US GoldMining stands out. So if you're interested, you can check it out through the link in the description. Do your own extensive research on US GoldMining. Symbol USGO on the NASDAQ. Make sure you review US GoldMining's annual report and other filings with the SEC when you research this opportunity. Between the 1960s and 1980s, the United States was the undisputed king of rare earths, but then China came along and stole the crown in the blink of an eye. Today, the Asian country accounts for around 70% of global mining of these minerals, and not only that, it has been doubling its production every 5 years for decades. So how did it achieve such dominance? A key part of the answer lies beneath its feet. China is literally a rare earth mine. It's estimated to have half the world's deposits. Its 44 million tons of reserves are double those of Brazil, which ranks second. But let's clarify something here. Despite their name, rare earths are not so rare. Take cerium, for example. You've probably never heard of it, but it's more abundant in the Earth's crust than copper or nickel. The real problem is that the deposits are very scattered. There are no large veins like with iron or gold, and that makes extraction very expensive. For a mine to be profitable, you need several of these minerals to be concentrated in the same place. Otherwise, forget it. But wait, because here's an interesting fact. China has 50% of the reserves, but produces 70%. How is that possible? Does it have better mines than the rest of the world? Partly yes, but the real reason lies elsewhere. China hasn't hesitated to exploit even the least profitable deposits, and that includes paying the environmental price. Why all the effort? Because we're talking about a strategic sector, a matter of national security. This explains why the business is in the hands of just 2 public companies. This is in stark contrast to other key industries, such as electric cars, where the Chinese state allows the private sector a little more leeway. And as for the environment, well, what can I say?
China has paid a high price for its dominance in rare earths. Dust and groundwater contaminated with heavy metals and radioactive chemicals pose a health threat that the authorities have been trying to address for years.
Now, let's make one thing clear from the outset. China gained control of rare earths by exploiting deposits that not only destroy the environment, but also the health of its own people. But pay attention, because all that is now history. These days, if China continues to dominate this sector, it's not because it has lax environmental standards, it's because its companies are the most advanced in the world. Xi Jinping no longer needs to pollute entire rivers to extract these valuable minerals. He now has at his disposal the most efficient and eco-friendly methods on the planet. And not only that, he also has the best experts. In China, there are 39 universities with postgraduate programs focused on rare earths. And in the United States, 0. Not a single one. And that brings us straight to the second key point in this story. Because yes, China leads in mining, but its real power lies elsewhere, in the refining of these minerals. And this is where things get even more interesting. Chinese companies account for 90% of global rare earth refining, and in heavy rare earths, we're talking about almost 100%. Added to this is the refining of other materials that are also crucial to new technologies, such as gallium, graphite, molybdenum, and even lithium. China is the undisputed champion in the processing of virtually any material. And what does this mean? Well, if the US or Europe want to stop depending on China, it won't be enough to open more mines on local territory. In reality, that's the easy part. The really difficult thing will be to create companies to process these minerals that are as efficient as the Chinese ones. The problem is that these companies have a decades-long head start. But then again, many companies had one big advantage over China, and in the end, the Asian giant stole their thunder in just a few years. So why couldn't the same thing happen to Xi Jinping's country? At least that's what Donald Trump wants, and we've already told you that he has a plan to achieve it. He's not alone in this. Australia and Japan are also throwing their weight behind this. Even Estonia is becoming an alternative to China. Yes, Estonia. You heard correctly. But of all these initiatives, the most ambitious is happening in the US, so let's take a look. Until now, the US's only strategy for circumventing Chinese export controls has been, well, circumventing them. Technically, China did not export a single gram of germanium to the US in 2024. 0. Nothing. Not a speck. Reality? More than 3,500 kilos of Chinese germanium ended up in US factories. And take note, because that figure could be an underestimate. How do we know? Well, pay attention to the following fact, which reeks of foul play from a mile away. China officially blocked 5,900 kilos of germanium destined for the US, but at the same time, its exports to Belgium skyrocketed 6,100 kilos, a 240% increase from one year to the next. What a coincidence, right? However, this possible strategy to evade controls may work for now, but if China gets serious, a much more ambitious plan will be needed. A plan like this.
America's biggest rare earth producer makes a play to end China's dominance. Fresh Pentagon investment and a deal with Apple are turbocharging MP Materials' goals, but the hurdles it has faced and still faces highlight the challenge of reviving the industry in the US.
MP Materials. Remember that name, because it could become one of the most important companies in the world, or a monumental failure, but we'll talk about that in a moment. The MP comes from Mountain Pass, the only rare earth mine in the US that is still active today. In its day, this Californian mine was one of the most important in the world, but as we've said, the rise of China left the US mining sector in ruins. To give you an idea, When the previous company in charge of the mine went bankrupt in 2015, it had only 8 employees. An abandoned mine in the middle of nowhere and in the hands of a team with no experience in the sector.
We've got no money, we've got 8 people, the site was bankrupt, everyone says the US can't make rare earths, said Rosenthal, the company's operations chief. We couldn't go to an engineer and say, want to leave Rio Tinto to join us?
What did MP Materials do in this situation? It asked Chinese companies for help. These companies contributed their technology and know-how. Thanks to this, the company was able to extract rare earths profitably. The problem? Well, extraction is one thing, refining is quite another. Right now, MP Materials has to send 80% of what it extracts directly to China for processing. And to make matters worse, its production remains ridiculously low if it really wants to revive the sector in the United States. However, MP Materials is not giving up. They are investing heavily in new mining and processing techniques to even the playing field. And as we mentioned earlier, they are no longer alone. They now have a new strategic partner, the Pentagon itself. The US government has gone from watching from the sidelines to getting fully involved in the game. How? By using the Department of Defense as a battering ram. It has bought 15% of MP Materials shares, becoming its largest shareholder. Yes, even ahead of giants such as BlackRock. So what is the plan? Very simple, to increase production tenfold, hence the name, the Plan for 10. The goal is to go from the current 1,000 tons to 10,000. To achieve this, the Pentagon has signed a 10-year agreement with all kinds of incentives, soft loans, free rein to build new infrastructure, and the juiciest of all, a total purchase guarantee. The Department of Defense is committing to buy all of the rare earth magnets produced by MP Materials and at a fixed price, $110 per kilo. Now, is that a lot or a little? Just look at the price evolution of this material. Excluding the pandemic period, the price of these magnets has been stagnant below $50 for over a decade, and today it's around $60. In other words, MP Materials is guaranteed a customer who will pay twice as much as the rest of the market. Of course, if for any reason the price exceeds $110, then a third of the extra profits will go to the Pentagon. The idea is that this system will guarantee 2 things: stability and income. These are the 2 most valuable ingredients for innovation, which is precisely what the US and the rest of the world needs. And yes, I know what you're all thinking, but if it has a guaranteed customer, what incentive does it have to innovate and be competitive? You're absolutely right. The US government has made a bet, and a very risky one at that. You see, in China, the government also makes a lot of bets on industry, but instead of putting all its eggs in one basket, it strongly favors competition, even between state-owned companies. In general, this approach works much better than the old trick of choosing a national champion and giving it unlimited money. We've seen it 1,000 times, even within the US. Take the case of Semitech, a group of semiconductor manufacturers that brought together companies such as Intel and IBM, and which Washington showered with as much government money as it could. The result, according to scientific articles, a complete disaster. Semitech damaged the sector's productivity, making it lower than it would have been if it had never existed. In the end, companies spent more time in Washington lobbying than innovating in their laboratories. So yes, this is a very risky bet, and the worst part is that it wasn't even necessary. You see, despite being such a strategic sector, the truth is that rare earths don't generate much money. In 2022, the US only imported between $170 million and $200 million worth of rare earths. As a comparison, the US government spent $300 million on potato chips alone. It's also less than Cristiano Ronaldo earns in a year. When China turns off the tap, the price skyrockets. Yes, but it's so little money that it's not a catastrophe. Of course, export controls can paralyze logistics chains. This is much more damaging than the price of the minerals themselves, but it's not an insurmountable problem. In 2010, China imposed brutal export controls on its rare earths following a territorial dispute with Japan, and this issue was not fully resolved until 2015. The price of some of these minerals increased 45-fold, and many exceeded 10-fold. A great strategic victory for China. Right? Well, not so fast. The rest of the countries didn't stand still. They adapted their supply chains, innovated to reduce their dependence on rare earths, or to get more out of those they already had. And you can see the result on the screen. This move by China could have damaged the GDP of Western countries by 0.5%, which is truly staggering. However, thanks to all the adaptations we've told you about, the damage was 10 times smaller. In terms of GDP, China gained 12 times less than it would have if the rest of the world had stood idly by. And it's likely to have lost out when other factors are taken into account. In summary, when China caused a supply shock, the market was able to adapt without too many problems. This doesn't mean that the state cannot lend a hand, especially now that the geopolitical conflict is much more tense. What it does mean is that the US strategy of betting everything on one company instead of encouraging market competition, as China and South Korea do, is very, very risky. There's a lot of money at stake, which shows that this is a priority for the White House. But it's one thing for it to be a priority, and quite another for them to have chosen the best policy to defend their interests. Be that as it may, now it's your turn. Do you think China will continue to dominate rare earths over the next decade? What do you think of the Pentagon's latest gamble? Would you have chosen a different policy? You can leave me your answers in the comments. Don't forget that here on Visualeconomik we release new videos every week, so subscribe if you haven't already to make sure you don't miss any of our upcoming episodes. If you like this video, give it a like, and I'll see you next time. Take care. See you soon.